We're here with another episode of Conversations and Connections. We're the official podcast of the Family Crisis Center of East Texas. I'm Stuart Burson, the prevention coordinator for the agency. And with me today, no stranger to the podcast, but it's been a while, Will Windham. Will is our BIPP coordinator and part of the prevention team here at the Family Crisis Center. And I kind of wanted to continue the theme of Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month here in February. And I thought it might be interesting to maybe kind of talk with Will just about, Will, I was just kind of thinking the influences, the pressures, things that young men are facing today, what they have to live up to, and maybe things that may kind of play a part in incidents of teen dating violence. And I do want to say before we begin, by all means, I don't want to imply that it's just guys that are violent in dating relationships. It can happen with young women too. But since Will does have a unique perspective dealing with men in the prevention field, I just kind of thought it might be interesting to kind of discuss young men's roles in society today and how that may play a part. So with that long-winded introduction, Will, I really appreciate you taking some time out to do this today.
Yes, good to be back on the podcast. And great to always have the opportunity to talk about these things, especially as it relates to batterers intervention, our specific take we take on holding men accountable. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, glad to be back.
I guess, one of the first things I guess we can kind of talk about are pressures with teens, young men facing today. Just recently I did my presentation to our Serve Coalition about gender roles. And in that, we are talking about, you think about the kids on the playground and the messages they hear about, man up, don't be such a girl, don't be a wuss, little boys calling their friends the P word, and things like that. And, if you are part of the prevention world, this is probably old hat in a way, what we're about to talk about, but a lot of people may not have have really been exposed to this or have heard this. But for a young guy, there's a lot of pressures out there to make sure you uphold your masculinity, and you really can't let your guard down.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there's so many pressures out there for just teens in general. In our particular perspective here with young men is that, it's the same things that we faced, but it's just done through maybe different lenses of social media, of, what it means to get what we say, quote unquote, street cred here. So, lots of pressures on young men to live up to these ideas, this idea of money, how many women can you get? And yeah, it really does start with gender socializations all the way back to, the playground, and through the BIPP curriculum we use, they're pretty frank about, the number one thing that men don't want to be considered, and I'm sure this is all the way down to the playground, is that you just can't be gay, right? And I know that, it's just the number one thing they say. And really, when you start to think about it, or our own experience, or look around, really men are trying to justify that they're masculine enough, to not be considered homosexual, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where a lot of this homophobia probably kicks off, is you just can't be weak. You can't be essentially like a woman, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we briefly touched on that in your presentation, is that it isn't that we just often go after men in these situations where they're maybe crying or show a little emotion. It's that when other men do that, they attack them through this lens of typically feminine characteristics, right? And so, and I know, like we discussed, it just sort of chips away at the way we value women, right?
And for the record, I'll kind of remind everybody, you are the BIPP coordinator. That's our batters intervention
and prevention
program, where you work actually with perpetrators of domestic violence, sexual assault. What do you think, so these pressures, the gender socialization, the pressures to, unfortunately, so much pressure to, quote, not be gay. How do you think that translates to incidents of teen dating violence? Is it, I guess one of the questions I have, do you think the world has changed? Do you think teen dating violence is just as common now as it was years and years ago? Have more boys now facing more pressure, or is it media's attention or focusing on it more, or has it really anything changed?
I'm not sure. I think when I grew up, the era I grew up in, it seemed like we talk about the same things that were present in our life then, right? Mm-hmm. The same pressures to sort of live up, to be masculine, to be athletic, to sort of present yourself as, popular and capable, right. And so I think that these young men still face these same pressures to live up to that. Now, how that translates to domestic violence is, I think it really centers around our two tenets, and that's power and control, right? In order to ensure your maleness in this world, you need some sort of power and control. And I think maybe when we talk about teens just understanding the world, they're looking to exercise power and control. And when you think about where do young men as teenagers, where can they gain power and control in their lives at all, right? Typically not with parents, typically, not in the male social groups, because there's one or two guys maybe that are exercising all that power and control. So you get in a relationship with a female, and I think just our general attitudes and the way we, generally right. value women leads to those incidences, right? Yeah.
And I think it's not only really teen dating violence, but you can think of sexual assaults as well. Of course, sometimes those may even come hand in hand.
Yes.
Observations, when we work with young guys, you and I have had experience working with juvenile probation, or kids in the juvenile probation system. We go to the schools, to high schools and middle schools, and things like that. And it's interesting sometimes whenever I bring the gender socialization message, even to young people, I feel like I always have to preface it by saying, guys, I'm not trying to tell you can't be guys. I'm not telling you to turn in your man card. But I think at the same time, we kind of have to be careful that we're not male bashing. But I guess what I'm getting at is sometimes I do get looks, even from young boys, like even in middle school, that don't really buy into the whole gender socialization. When we say, hey, it's okay for guys to show their emotions. It's okay to cry. It's okay to have feelings and be sensitive. And it's really a tough thing to try to sell in rural East Texas.
I agree with that. I think, you sort of get these values through the program, as we say, that you download as young men. And although, and you hear this, if one guy in a group of guys believes, let's say he has feminist tendencies, he believes these things, right? We should be fair. We shouldn't devalue men by using degrading things about women. It's really risky for him to speak up, right? Yeah. And say those things. And so I think that's what keeps a lot of young men from, they really hold those values. And I think, again, as young men, part of what you're raised with is this black and white, win or lose type situation. So it's hard to see that, you could share control. You don't need all of it, or that you don't have to be the toughest person, mm-hmm. right? This whole win or loss attitude. There is some areas in between where
right.
And I think hard for them to sort of decipher the differences out on the high school ball fields, maybe, or junior high playgrounds and things.
Yeah,
so
right.
Yes.
So you're a parent. What would you tell a parent who's raising a teen male today? Things to make sure that this young man has a level head is, and I'm not saying they have to be raised as a feminist, but to be mindful of their actions, of the way they treat people. Any sage advice, I guess, is what I'm getting at, that you could tell a parent of a young adult or a young man, I should say.
Yeah, I think we always start when we have these conversations is, model the behavior that you want your children, especially a young male, to have, right? I think if we're running around and we're using sort of these degrading comments and we're not really valuing the kid's mother, of course, that's the perspective they're going to take, right? So I think it starts with modeling the behavior. And then, of course, I think you've got to check in with them. Again, I think we know that it's these larger attitudes we have about women that cause a lot of problems, right? Women are weak. Women are bad with money. Women are always going to cheat. Those you got to check in and make sure that, maybe, hey, what are your attitudes about these things, or that you're not sort of selling those attitudes, that women are just objects, or, we're promoting pornography or something like that, and I think you got to check in with those. We know every guy out here is going to see pornography, right? You got to check in with them, and hey, that's not real, right? We know you see it. Statistics say everyone sees it. So let's have a conversation about it. Again, one of those things that isn't always comfortable, but
right. Well, and what you said really perfectly leads to my next question. We're talking about, our influence as parents and how, young guys and women learn their ideas, learn their behaviors on how they should act with their parents. But also, you talked about, access to porn. And that kind of leads me to media's influence today. Let's think about movies, music. What messages are these things giving our guys about how they should treat women, their attitude towards relationships and sex and things like that? I mean, at the risk of sounding like an old man, music isn't what it used to be when I was a kid, and probably not even when you were a kid. I think it's gotten a lot more suggestive. Well, I don't even know if I can say suggestive. A lot of it's not suggestive, and they just lay it out there in some of the music today. But what do you think about the media influence media has in the ideas of how young men think they should treat whoever they're in a relationship with, and their roles as men?
Yeah, I think if we look at the larger values, of music, what sells, what, with the Super Bowl coming up, what we're going to put up at halftime, and those performers and the way they dress and look, and you think to be popular, you've either got to have that or have the money to afford those things. And that, it's just not really realistic. The access to porn, at a younger and younger age really skews what a sexual relationship means. I mean, I think I hear a lot of people would say, well, we use it as sex education. Our parents didn't talk to us about sex, so we turned to porn to find out about what it was all about. Well, that may be well-intentioned enough, but what you didn't pick up in there was, the objectification of women,
right.
The way that there is no consent being given. There is no sharing of the power decision making in porn.
Right.
It's all male slanted. Not all of it is, but a lot of it they point to as the aggressive type of porn.
Well, and I always try to tell young people too. Porn, that is definitely not a depiction of what a real relationship is like in general. I guess with parents saying, or kids say, well, they turn to porn, I guess that can teach you the physiology or whatever you want to call it, of how reproduction takes place. But, where is that relationship? Where is that consent, like you said? and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, and again, difficult conversations, tough to have. I'm right there with everyone with that, but you can't let porn teach your kids about sexual relationships because it's not going to turn out well, one way or other. It's just very risky.
So, Will, you work with men who who are perpetrators, and pretty much they're ordered by the courts to attend your BIPP program. What do you see from the BIPP guys you work with? Do you think they do they ever talk about what their attitude was like when they were young, when they were dating, when they were teenagers?
We definitely visit some of that. Feedback and that gets iffy, getting these men to really open up about what they were doing back then as teenagers. But I think that certainly it's a pattern, right?
Yeah.
A lot of domestic violence or inter-partner violence is a pattern. I don't think that, you came up through being a kid and you had a girlfriend or girlfriends in high school, and then when you were 26 years old, you met the love of your life and instantly became jealous enough to, perpetrate some type of violence, So I think it's just a pattern and attitudes. The men, certainly a lot of them have seen domestic violence, but I think it really centers in this idea around, again, power and control. And, you start taking that away from men, and it's not a good thing, right? We don't know how to deal with sharing decision-making, sharing power, sharing money. Again, the number one things we fight about. Again, back to the sexual relationships, how men take no for an answer in those situations. How do you handle that? Who ever talked to you about that, know? And so, again, you really have no formal education. I think these men have no formal education in those things. No one's ever prompted them to think about it. So it becomes a problem in the moment, And
do you think in some instances the lack of a male role model has anything to do or plays a part in teen dating violence?
I think that, definitely you need a strong role model. Not everybody has that. I think where maybe we lack is that we just don't have the conversation at all, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't really through public schools go out and have these conversations with young men. Hard to get them all in one room and say, hey, what are your thoughts around these attitudes? And sort of circling back to where we were, it only takes 2 or 3 guys to get up and make a joke in a group of guys about what you're talking about for all the interest to be turned off.
Yeah,
because you just definitely can't show that you're interested in a topic like that.
Yeah.
So,
okay. All right. Will Windham, our BIPP coordinator here at the Family Crisis Center. Of course, again, BIPP, Batters Intervention and Prevention Program. Will works with men who have or been ordered by the courts to come attend the class because they've been, found guilty of either domestic violence, sexual assault, things like that.
Yes,
right?
yes, yeah. And then any questions about men, you can contact me directly, reach out to Stuart, and we can we could come have a talk with them. We'll do all we can to sort of promote this again.
Yeah.
Easy enough to go out and talk about domestic violence and sexual assault in general. A little harder to engage men about it, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that's the thing. If you're listening to this and you have a group of young men in mind, it could be a church group or an organization or maybe at a school or anywhere where you work with a group of guys and ladies also. I do want to say that we can come in and talk to them about prevention education, several different types of discussions we can have with them in presentations. So again, if you are interested in that or if you feel like you need any of the services of the Family Crisis Center, we do have our toll-free number. That's 1-800-828-7233. And of course, that's answered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And be sure to subscribe to Conversations and Connections. You can do that via Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or the podcast service of your choice. And if you would like to donate to the Family Crisis Center, you can go to our website. Our website is FamilyCrisisCenterofEastTexas.com. There at the bottom left, you'll see a donate button. Click on that if you'd like to make a monetary donation to help survivors of relationship violence. Be the voice, if not for you, for someone else.